Let me tell you a story, a Christmas ghost story. Welcome to Truly Terrified, Paranormal versus Physics, where we talk about some really weird stuff and Joe the scientist explains how it's not possible. Or maybe it is. I'm Lynn and...
I'm Joe.
Okay. All right, did you know that it's kind of like this thing that's been around for a long time that people tell ghost stories at Christmas time?
It seems familiar.
I didn't know that.
I mean, I don't know. It kind of it makes sense. Like, think of, what's his name? Scrooge?
Dickens?
No, what's his name? It's like...
It's about Scrooge, but it was Charles Dickens who wrote it.
Okay. And there's this, like, it's the Grim Reaper or something. Some creepy entity comes...
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's the ghost of Christmas past.
It's a ghost.
The ghost of Christmas
It's literally
present,
a ghost
and the
story.
ghost of the future. Yes, it is a ghost story. So that's where I started. I started with, what's the deal with that? And then I discovered, yeah, that's like a thing where people tell ghost stories at Christmas time. And then I stumbled across this story. And I'm just going to tell this one story, and you can comment as desired. There's nothing really physics about it, although there are some key points that we can address about the science of this situation. But this is the story of Bramshill House. Bramshill House is in Bramshill, northeast Hampshire, England. That's a mouthful. And it's one of the largest and most important mansions in England. It was built in the early 17th century by the 11th Baron Zouche of Herringworth. Now, I may be pronouncing that wrong, but I'm going to go ahead and keep pronouncing it as Zouche, because I don't know what else it is. Lord Zouche was kind of a big deal. He was a noted statesman, adventurer, and philosopher during the Elizabethan period. If you don't know, the Elizabethan period took place from 1558 to 1603 and is considered by many historians to be the golden age in English history. So it was Elizabeth I's reign, and everything was lovely in England, and everybody was happy, and so they kind of partied hardy. So Zouche was a friend of the famous William Cecil, the chief minister of Queen Elizabeth, and he was closely associated with Francis Bacon, the Earl of Leicester. He knew the Earl of Essex, Sir Walter Raleigh, and other important and well-known men of that period. So he was a big deal. Zouche used his vast wealth building this giant mansion. Ever since, it has been considered one of the noblest, most beautiful monuments of Elizabethan architecture in England. It is immense, and it is gorgeous. It's 150 feet long or wide, whichever aspect you look at it. And it was built in the shape of an E with the middle little leg sticking out, and that's where the front door, the main entrance, is.
I like concave spaces.
I know you do.
So.
And it's just immense. I looked at photographs of it because it's still standing. I looked at paintings of it, and there are famous paintings done at that time in the 1600s and early 1700s. That depicted parties being held there. I mean, this was a big deal place. Mm-hmm. High above the entrance was a huge statue of Lord Zouche in full armor. He
put
himself up there.
Wow.
Inside were oak paneling halls. There were huge halls and gilded salons, immense corridors that stretched off till you couldn't even see the end. There were incalculable treasures in the form of pictures, old furniture, huge tables, curiously carved chests, and beautifully wrought metalwork. This is like what you think of when you think of the vast wealth of the barony. I mean, it's just immense. It was so big that even people who'd spent their entire lives there wouldn't have been familiar with all the rooms. The walls were extremely thick, and there were rumors that there were secret chambers inside those walls.
Imagine.
Probably. They said there were many secret chambers. So this place is riddled with mystery. Halls that stretch off.
It doesn't exist anymore?
No, it's still there. It's still there, only it's not privately owned.
Imagine, like, you could, do, like, ground penetrating radar.
Oh, wouldn't that be
essentially
cool?
the same thing on the wall.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that'd be totally cool. Maybe somebody has. I'm going to check into that. That would be really
neat.
cool.
I know people have used that kind of thing to scan other things, to see like there's a void in this whatever coffin or whatever.
One of the secret chambers in the walls was the study where Lord Zeus went for privacy while pursuing his philosophical and scientific work. I couldn't find any real description of what his philosophical and scientific work was, but considering it was the 1600s, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know. I've never heard of his name before.
No, I haven't. I had not either.
I don't think he made much contribution.
No. So the house cost a lot to keep up. And when Zeus died, his descendants weren't able to keep it up. They weren't able to take care of it, run it, prevent it start falling down. And so it passed into the possession of a family called the Copes. The Copes are actually somehow related to, now in modern days, somehow related to the Hiltons. This was a wealthy family of that time. Most of the Cope baronets had the first name of John, strangely enough.
Is that like named after the king kind of thing?
No, there wasn't a king. No, I don't.
They just liked the name?
I don't know. I don't know why they would name everybody John.
Why do some people name their kid after themselves and they accumulate? It's like the seventh John.
I don't know. One of the early Sir John Copes, had a beautiful daughter. Well, he actually had two beautiful daughters, but since in their family genealogy, the other daughter named Anne married someone different than the man in this story, I'm going to assume that it's Elizabeth that this story is about. Because every place where I saw the record of it, they never named which daughter it was. Some people assumed it was Anne. I found Anne's marriage record in their genealogy, so I don't think it was Anne. I think it was Elizabeth. So I'm going to say it was Elizabeth, going ahead and defying what everybody else has said. Elizabeth became engaged to a man named Lord Lovell.
Lovell?
Lovell. I don't know. It looks like Lovell to me. Lovell.
Lovell.
I don't know. So Lovell was a very wealthy young man. He was a nobleman, but his title had become extinct and the family had completely disappeared from nobility. So it might have been a strategic move on his part to marry into the wealthy Cope family. There's no evidence to suggest that, but it does make you wonder that maybe this was something other than a love match. The day of the wedding arrived shortly before Christmas. The ceremony and party were held in the mansion or castle
The E-mansion?
The E-mansion, yeah. So because of the holiday season, Sir John, the father, Sir John Cope, he thought it would be a great idea to combine the wedding with the usual festivities of Christmas. Okay, that sounds all right. Back in the Elizabethan period, weddings were supposedly pretty wild events. There were multiple parties, music, plays, games, lots of food, lots and lots and lots of food, like feasts, like
was
you
that
see in
just
movies.
like nobility doing that, or?
I'm assuming that regular people couldn't afford to do things like that, but they
they
probably
still
did
had,
their own.
parties.
Yeah, they probably did their own version of it. Even the noble families like lords and barons had such out-of-control parties that it's claimed that modern people would be shocked. I don't know if that's true, but here is an example of one of the parties, one of the activities at a wedding feast like this one. For instance, it wasn't unusual for the guests, after drinking a lot of wine and liquor, to start fighting over the bride's most intimate apparel. Gross. And before finally leaving the house, insisting upon arranging the happy pair on the nuptial couch. Okay, I had to look this up. What is a nuptial couch? Well, it's what you probably would guess. But I wanted to look it up just to make sure. It was a bed where the newly married couple were supposed to have their first sexual encounter. So that's really pretty freaking weird. They're fighting over underwear.
The culture of that sort of stuff in religion and Western history is pretty weird.
Yeah, so I thought that was pretty weird.
Verging on obsessive, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay, so back to Elizabeth Cope and Lord Lovell's wedding. It was one of the greatest and craziest that had ever been known in England up to that point. The mansion was filled with distinguished guests from all over the country. People came from everywhere to go to this party. This is like the party to go to. Remember, the Copes are this bigwig family. They've got this mansion that Zoosh built, and he was a bigwig, and now this daughter is marrying this guy that nobody knows, but that's okay. So most of the nobility and great landed squires came with their families because you have to travel long distances, and that was like this huge event. And this building is big enough to handle them all because it's so vast. 150 feet long, 3, 4, 5 stories.
Regular house, like 20 feet long.
30 feet, maybe if it's a
like
it's
we're
a ranch,
assuming a
it might be
square
40 feet.
thing.
A square thing is probably a square house is probably 35 feet. If it's multiple stories, it would be bigger. If it was one story.
So, and that's square?
No, it's
rectangular.
It looked rectangular. The pictures I've seen looks like it's wide.
And it's multiple stories.
Multiple stories with things on top.
And underground.
Probably cellars too, yes. So the banquet was lavish. A wild boar, huge, roasted and stuffed, was arranged with its head and tusks raised up in a lifelike pose. It was brought into the banquet hall on a gigantic platter by the servants. So they carried this dead pig on a platter with it in a lifelike pose. Is that just gross? Musicians played and sang, and appropriate music continued at all times from the minstrel's gallery. So it's music and giant pigs being carried around on platters.
Remember we were just talking a little while about dopamine?
Yeah.
And how you can essentially have too much stimulation. Yeah. How those people can function.
Well, I don't think they did function. I don't think they did function.
Nobility probably didn't have to function.
I don't think they had to. So the reason why we know some of these details is because they are preserved in the archives of the house. The house is now passed on to, whatever, the public trust, whatever it is, and all those archives are maintained there. So we know that 200 geese and 200 ducks were provided for the guests, in addition to the giant pig.
Disgusting.
The birds were especially, quote unquote, fat and luscious, because the Copes had for centuries held the honorable court office of Sergeant of the Poultry to His Majesty the King.
That is just...
I don't know what to say. Oh my God.
I mean, even if you're not like a vegetarian, that it's a whole army.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's just gross. I don't know.
And having people waiting on you to bring your gluttonous feast.
Imagine. Okay, let's say the party is like, they get together and they just talk and they have like light party stuff and they eat like a mild meal. And they all enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
What is the distinction there? Why do they have to then just go way hard?
I think that...
And imagine, nowadays, there'd be drugs too. So it would be like, just completely pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
And what have you gained?
Okay, so this
marginal
is what
over just the regular.
This is what I think happens. I think that somebody throws a party, and the next person, we're talking higher up in the social hierarchy. So somebody throws a party, and the next person that throw a party says, "Oh, I got to top that."
I know, yeah.
And it just keeps getting bigger and more insane, and the people just get more out of control. All right. There was also, I mentioned that wine and liquor are drunk at these things. Well,
Oh, yeah, there's your drum.
there was a tremendous amount of wine, at least. I don't know about liquor, because Sir John had a rare stock of expensive wines in his cellars. And I think that when they say cellars, they mean wine cellars. So probably it is underground, but I don't know. After dinner, there was dancing and music in that huge, great hall, which isn't a hallway like we're talking about. You know, it's like a dance hall. And Elizabeth, the bride, was growing tired of all the hilarity and suggested that her husband and a few of the younger men and women play some games like hide and seek. Probably she was just wanting to get away from this insanity.
Yeah.
So the idea was that a girl would hide herself, and the first man who found her got to kiss her. Of course, they've got to take it, you know, to the next level.
Yeah.
And these are not children. These are adult people. And from the genealogy that I saw, it looked like she was about 24 or so when she died. So that's old enough to, like, be over it, you know.
I mean, different cultural standards, but you would think, because usually what happens as people get older is they just kind of like, they don't get the same thrill out of certain things.
Yeah.
And so that's why they don't do those things that are associated with childhood, because it's not that interesting anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you know, like if a kid came up to you and said, hey, let's play hide and seek, you know, you could play it and have fun. So I don't think it's like that kind of thing is necessarily like...
It's not bad. It's just, I don't know. It just strikes me as odd.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth said she'd go first, but she asked for a 5-minute head start, which makes sense because you're going to play hide and go seek. The person has to have a chance to go and find a hiding spot.
That would be cool to play hide and seek in a giant mansion.
Yeah, until you find out what happened.
Oh, yeah.
So everyone turned and waited until the 5 minutes was up, and then they started to hunt for her. Lovell was naturally, he's the bridegroom, he was naturally anxious to find her first because he wanted to be the one to kiss her. He didn't want somebody else kissing her. And they hunted, and they hunted, and they hunted, but they couldn't find her. For several hours, they hunted. And then the laughter died because this is no longer funny. They cannot find her. I would imagine that maybe they considered she was tired, maybe she went somewhere and went to sleep. But they're looking in the rooms, you know, and pretty soon they get everyone together when it dawns on them that this is serious. They cannot find her. And so guests and servants formed parties and began searching, you know, methodically searching this mansion. But again, remember, there are so many rooms that there are rooms that some people who lived there had never been in. And there are reportedly hidden rooms in the walls. So they search every room and every closet, but they do not find her.
Including the hidden rooms?
Well, the ones they could find.
Okay.
I mean, if they're hidden.
Yeah.
Some people thought she'd run away, but days passed, months, years, and nobody ever heard from her again, ever. And that was the end of Elizabeth. Lord Lovell never believed for a minute that his bride had deserted him. He just could not believe it. He was sure from the first that something terrible had happened to her, and he spent his whole life searching for her, searching the mansion for her. He didn't want to leave the mansion, and Cope said, sure, you can stay. And so he lived out his life in the mansion. Okay, now remember back when I said he was from this family that had lost their fortune, and they'd kind of disappeared from social strata, and maybe he had an ulterior motive in marrying her. Well, I'm suggesting that perhaps he did have an ulterior motive, and his ulterior motive was to get to live in this frickin' castle for the rest of his life.
That would be cool.
However, he never married again. He stayed there in the mansion, and he grew old and was still wondering what had happened to Elizabeth. People thought he was a madman. Harmless, but a madman.
Well,
okay.
You know.
So 50 years later, 50 years later, he was running his hand, Lovell was running his hand for the 1,000th time over the oaken paneling of a room on the top floor. So it's like halfway up the wall, there'd be paneling, wooden paneling, and then there'd be a rail, and then, you know, probably plaster above that.
Yeah.
Maybe with wallpaper or something. And he's running his hand over that wood.
Why?
He's looking for the secret
he's still
rooms.
searching. Yeah, okay.
And somewhere along it, he's running his hand. He's run his hand over, but maybe he just touched on the exact right spot. It was an elaborately carved piece of woodwork, and the paneling popped open, and it revealed a secret closet. And he went inside, and there was an ancient oak chest, which was bound with iron. And if you think about old chests, they would put wrap iron around it, and to keep the pieces of wood together.
Yeah,
So-
to keep the wood together.
Right.
So that's how they bound the wood
Right.
together. Yeah.
It was dusty, but it was solid, and it was beautifully carved. So it was something valuable, and it had probably been used as a place to, you know, repository for documents. So here's a secret compartment. Here's a trunk. Put things in it, whatever. I couldn't find anything that said whether or not anything like secret documents were found in it, but that's probably what it was used for. Reports say that he used tools to get into it, but I doubt that he did. He probably had servants come and break it open.
He still doesn't own this property.
No.
He's just living.
Well, probably the father-in-law has died, and so there's a son. Cope had a son, so the property probably belongs to the son. But, you know, if you lived in a building that was 150 feet long and 6 stories high or whatever it was, you probably wouldn't care if your crazy, harmless, madman brother-in-law lived down at the other wing. You wouldn't care. Although him wandering around touching everything probably would be kind of weird, but okay.
Yeah.
So somebody comes, whether it was Lovell or a servant, somebody comes, they pop open the trunk, and there she was.
Dead.
Clearly, after 50 years. She was skeletonized, still wearing her wedding dress, and her hand was raised like she was trying to pry or push the lid open.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. So, evidently, she somehow found that secret closet, probably at some point in her childhood, you know.
Yeah, so
And knew it was there and decided to hide there, figured it was a good spot, nobody'd find her. Why she got into the trunk, I mean, just being in the compartment alone.
Secret compartment's good enough.
So that's one. That's A. Evidence A.
That it wasn't her who got in? Or?
Why did she get in a trunk when she's already in a secret compartment?
So evidence A for
wondering, what?
Oh,
Why?
yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
That this is not cut and dry.
Like it's not just she went into the thing.
Yeah, and then hid in a trunk in a secret compartment. You're in a secret compartment, you don't need to be in the trunk too. They say when she pulled the lid down of the trunk, it had a spring in it, and so it latched shut. And she couldn't. It was heavy, and she couldn't open it. So it sounds like it's quite large. Somebody remarked somebody made a comment after one of these articles about it, and said that they were familiar with old trunks, and on the inside they didn't have the safety things that we have now. You have a trunk now, you have a way to open it from the inside.
From the inside, yeah.
They didn't have that, and so if the lid came down, the latch closed, a spring mechanism closed it. Okay, so think about an old suitcase. You have to pull that little thing off to the side because there's a spring, and then the lever can be, the little latch can be pulled up. So if it came down, that latch, you have to pull the spring over.
You said they used tools to open it?
Yeah, so I'm wondering if it just rusted or, you know, after 50 years. And also, presumably, moisture.
A lot of moisture.
A huge
moisture. Impulse of moisture.
Yes, and so
now.
that was actually addressed, that this secret room was near a chimney, and it was in the top floor of the house, so probably it was warm, and it was taking away any odors.
Oh, yeah.
And
Well, I mean, it smells bad. Sometimes, you know, an animal dies.
that's true. In a house that vast, you would think that there might be. Also, the fact that she was skeletonized, not mummified, there was moisture involved.
Yeah.
Because she had to have, putrefied.
Ugh.
So because of all those things, the fact that she had her hand up and it was a tight-fitting lid, all of those things, they figured she died of suffocation. There's no way to know for sure, but that's what they figured, she died of suffocation. So some people have estimated that she may have lasted through the whole night following her wedding day. So that whole night, because there might have been a little bit of air in getting through in the chest, but couldn't have been very much. And just breathing in your own air, eventually you would have succumbed. If any air did enter a minute amount, all it would have done is serve to make her death lingering. It would not have extended her life. Like, she didn't die of starvation or thirst. So some people have asked the question, could she hear the footsteps of people searching for her and calling out her name? It's possible, but it's probably not true, because the walls were very thick in that house. She was behind, on the other side of a thick wall, behind paneling, inside an oaken chest that was in a closet. Who knows how far from that opening she was? And presumably there was furniture in those rooms. So it's doubtful that anybody could have heard her, even if she had cried out, or that she could have heard anybody else. She might have felt vibrations of people running, but she probably really didn't know that people were even looking for her. So to this day, that chest is on display in the mansion. I would love to go see it. I would love to look and see if there's fingernail scratch marks on the inside of the lid.
God. Do they have pictures?
I couldn't find pictures of, I saw pictures of the outside of it. I did not, but there was no context, so I couldn't tell how big it was. And there were no pictures of the inside of it, because it would be stained on the inside. It would be stained from fluid. Were there other things in there? It
would be pretty gross.
It would be pretty gross. I mean, dried out by that time, but it would be nasty.
So this whole story gives me vibes of like the kid who gets trapped in the refrigerator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
the same thing, like.
Yeah.
How those worked is it was like a clamp, or that you could only really open from the outside. Nowadays,
you could just push it.
Any pressure opens the thing.
Right. But it was such a huge problem about kids crawling into refrigerators and getting stuck and dying. In fact, when your kid went missing, even when you kids, well, maybe not you, Chrissy and Carrie for sure, when they were little, that was the first thing you did, is you went and looked if there were any old refrigerators around. You looked in the old refrigerators because it was a big danger. Ovens, I don't think ever latched like that, but yeah, refrigerators, horrible. Okay, so here's where the ghosty stuff comes in.
Okay.
In the mansion, people who stay there say they are kept awake at night by the stifled moans of a woman in terrible agony. They hear muffled sounds like those of a person beating on the interior of a thick wooden chest.
Well, so they know about her.
Probably,
and the story.
because the chest is on display, so it's probably tells why it's on display.
So that does not help. I mean, even if it was just, these people are having legitimate experiences, but it's just bad dreams, they can't help it. They'll have it anyway, and they may even believe it's really happening, and it will be happening at night, and
Yeah.
Of course, if you got like a recording of it or something,
Exactly.
Ghost hunters go in there. They would never let ghost hunters go in.
I don't know. I'll check into
The
it.
place to stay would be in that hidden room.
Oh, God. One visiting English society woman reported, quote, "During the night I had the most terrifying experience. Shortly after midnight I was awakened suddenly with the sensation that I was not alone in the bedroom. Then from behind the ancient oak paneling I heard noises of light, hurrying footsteps. What followed was even more terrifying. I heard moans of the most heartrending kind, and then strange sounds like hands beating upon a wooden partition."
So, as if, like, it's her running behind the wall, gets in, and then starts dying immediately.
Yeah. "The moans so terrified me that I fainted away, and it was daylight when I recovered consciousness. That might be called sleeping.
Sleeping, yeah.
I made an excuse for leaving the castle and hurried away." End quote.
See, again, it's like even if there's a ghost of the lady in the place, some people are going to have bad dreams.
Yeah.
You can't just I'm in bed at night and hear this.
And then I lost consciousness and I woke up, or when I came to, it was
amazing.
morning.
I fainted. I faint every night. All night for 8 hours. I wish.
One servant said that in the stillness of the night, he heard the clatter of bony feet hurrying up the stairway into the attic. With this came an accompanying sound like the swish of skirts, and later on, a muffled thump, like the falling of the cover of a heavy chest.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to say, while I'm sitting here mocking these people, terror could certainly make you believe that you're hearing those things. And perhaps they were hearing those things. The problem with people letting their emotions get the best of them about paranormal stuff is that it takes away any kind of real looking into or consideration for paranormal things, because it all just seems absurd. It seems like ridiculous.
You mean because they're panicking and...
Yeah, I was at night, I fainted, and when I came to, it was morning. Seriously? Seriously?
That's true. It is. With something like that, it's like, okay, you're out on a deserted road at night, and then you see a bright light, and down come a craft, and out come little aliens, and then they get back in and fly away. In the best case, you're not completely freaking out and shitting yourself. You're taking a picture and remembering which direction it came from,
Right.
So that is an important point is, okay, can you explain exactly what you heard?
Right. Because
and
what
it can't just be polluted with what you
emotions
think is going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And not that emotions pollute a story, because emotions can give richness to a story and put context to it.
To a story.
To a story. However, when you're relating something that you want someone to understand that it happened, you're... Okay, so for instance, she says terrifying, heartrending, terrified me. I made an excuse and hurried away. They're telling how they reacted to it. Now, there is an argument to be said that we don't really remember sensations. We remember our reaction to the sensations. So, you don't really remember the sensation of pain. You remember how you reacted to the pain, and that you can relate it to something else so that you can put it in context. And maybe this is how people relate these things. When we were talking about in the last episode with Rook and Christina about the Thanksgiving night poltergeist or whatever it was, we used a lot of those same words, but we also were trying to be very, very careful to give the details of what we actually saw and what we heard. And they're saying strange sounds like hands beating upon a wooden partition.
Yeah, so it's almost like it comes with the assumption, it was a ghost, I know it was a ghost, it's scary, and you know how it's going to sound like, you know what it's going to do.
Right.
And that's not helpful at all. I mean, if you don't have any information about this phenomena, whatever it is, you want more information. If it doesn't ever surprise you, whatever new stuff you're hearing about it doesn't surprise you, you're not learning anything.
Right.
So if it was like, yeah, I heard the telltale sign of the girl in the wall, and then she started whispering, and it was code. Like, okay, yeah, now tell them that. Like, go to the people and tell them that.
Yeah.
Go, like, she says, yes, I'm so sorry. Tell my future husband that blah, blah, blah.
You know what we should do? We should do the Ouija board and ask for Elizabeth Cope to come.
We should get a trunk and have it open, with like a stick and a string, and then when we get a hit,
and then catch her. Sick. So this story is referred to as the Mistletoe Bride. There have been movies, books, stories, and even songs written about it. And in fact, the song playing in the background of this episode is a song by that name, The Mistletoe Bride, by Thomas Haynes Bailey. I think the Cope family probably never enjoyed Christmas after that night. That sounds like it was really horrible.
Now that is a very stimulating party activity, to have someone die while you're partying and you have to search for them.
Search for their body. Yeah.
That's exactly how I would expect something like that to go.
That is absolutely horrific thought, and I don't like thinking about that. I don't want people to die at my parties. Not that I have parties, but if I did.
Well, if you have secret rooms...
That's true. What the hell?
Imagine this. You have a kid, and then you leave, like, you go in you open, like our thing, you open the patchway for the basement, and you go down and get your wine or like whatever, and the kid goes down, and you shut the thing, and you don't know they're down there. It could happen to anybody.
Yeah, it could.
And
it probably has happened many, many times.
Yeah, or cats. We're very careful about whenever we close something up. A cat has not gotten in.
Remember the cat that got in the swamp cooler in Nevada?
Yeah.
And was mummified.
Yeah. And that kind of thing does happen.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately, the non-relatable part about that story is we're not all completely useless rich assholes having ridiculously extravagant parties.
Yeah.
And we don't live in a gigantically huge castle.
Presumably all those people searching for her were drunk off their asses.
Yeah, that probably didn't help.
No, it probably didn't. And the servants were probably exhausted from carrying around dead pigs and hundreds of geese and ducks. Okay, so here's my question to you. Would you spend a night in that mansion?
Of course, that's fucking awesome. That place sounds really cool.
Yeah, it does.
It sounds immense, and it's E-shaped, which is awesome.
I think it'd be a blast to go and explore it. Okay, well that's all I got. That was my ghost story, because I'll tell you, most ghost stories about Christmas are really, really lame.
You know what is sort of a ghost story? That is kind of only peripherally kind of related to Christmas is Jesus. Consider, Jesus was resurrected. That means he was a ghost.
That's true, but he was resurrected at Easter.
Or a zombie.
Oh my God. Okay.
We could do that on Easter.
Zombies on Easter.
We could do... Does Jesus still walk the earth?
But there are people
on
who
Easter?
believe he does.
Yeah, but not like that, but like as a
like
fucking zombie,
flesh
because
hanging
he was
off
the
and-
zombie.
Oh my God, gross. Our contact information is in the show notes. You can email us, text us, or even call and leave a 3-minute voicemail. And if you message us, however you do, and you have a comment or a story or a question, Joe says we will respond in a future episode. Please share, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and never be so terrified you can't run. Don't get in the trunk.